They left behind miles of tunnels, gun emplacements and bunkers amid the mangrove swamps, some Korean sex slaves, a handful of emaciated POWs, and mass graves in the back country. With its heavy rains and luxuriant humidity, Mount Varzin was a densely forested and still active volcanic peak that loomed above the magnificent natural harbour of Blanche Bay on the island of New Britain. This was the same island which the Germans had once labelled New Pomerania, and which had formed a remote outpost of their fledgling colonial empire in what to this day is still called the Bismarck Archipelago. It lay to the east of Kaiser Wilhelm's Land, part of the sprawling pre-war Pacific colony of German New Guinea. Bismarck's diplomatic feat in creating this realm was thus commemorated in archipelagos and volcanoes and settlements. One of the main towns on the Gazelle Peninsula was simply named after his eldest son, Herbert. Perhaps the familiarity of these names reassured some of the Lutheran missionaries saving souls for Christ, the copra traders and shippers who established plantations and turned savages into labourers, the anthropologists and botanists who collected and classified the island's rare trees, orchids and butterflies. But the roughly 16,000 people already inhabiting the Gazelle Peninsula paid less attention to them than did the few hundred newcomers. "The natives obviously do not know the names given by Europeans," wrote the island's first ethnographer, "and the latter know the native designations just as little, and consequently it has come about that natives adrift in their canoes who finally arrived at a settlement could not be sent back to their homeland because the name that they gave to their dwelling place was totally unknown. To those who actually lived in the villages on its slopes, the name Varzin meant nothing. In fact, the natives often appeared to do without place names at all. But European colonial settlers could not operate in that way. For them, names meant power." In the very year that Germany's claim over the islands had won international recognition, Sibylle von Arnim had married Wilhelm von Bismarck. In those days her aging father-in-law still occasionally left Berlin for his country estate at Varzin. The substantial manor house set amid the Pomeranian forests had been his reward for presiding over the defeat of the Habsburg army and turning Prussia into the leader of a unified German Reich. It was there that he had in 1870 brooded on the eve of the war with France, leaving the Kaiser to try to cope without him. Yet Varzin was more than merely a retreat. It was linked to the capital by one of Germany's first telephone lines, and thence Bismarck summoned his colleagues and conducted much of the business of state. Calmed by the proximity of nature, his restless and nervous disposition found an almost mystical confirmation of the power of the land itself that went beyond snobbery. In his mind it represented his real kingdom on earth. It was, says one historian, the Reich in miniature. In this little state of his own, with its woods, fields and village, he grew tropical fruit in his greenhouses and established a substantial paper factory. Its raw materials came from the 4,000 hectares of forest which surrounded it, and its workforce was housed nearby. There were some labour problems on the land, and many local German peasants, chafing at life under something close to feudalism, drifted westwards into the cities. But Bismarck solved this in the same way that many of his neighbouring landowners did, by employing cheaper Russian and Polish migrant workers instead. Thus, the architect of the modern German state pursued a way of life increasingly reliant upon non-German hands. Names alone did not guarantee control of Germany's new tropical paradise. There were also the natives to contend with, both those who could be trained to collect and process the copra, tobacco and coffee that Europeans introduced, and those who preferred to hunt animals and each other amid the frangipani, palms and candle trees. Understanding these naked children of nature was the first step to knowing what to do with them, and it was important, at least in the eyes of the land's new masters, that Germany show itself capable in this respect too. With the now completed partitioning of the earth among the civilized states of Europe and America, wrote a museum administrator at the turn of the new century, the scientific investigation of